This is The Industrial Revolution by Thomas Wright, Andy Benson, and Chandler Ward. In Europe, the population was slowly rising, but in the 1780s the population spiked upwards. Since there was more people living in Europe, there became an increasing demand for goods such as clothing. With more and more goods now being demanded at quicker rates, new machines had to be made to increase production rates. In order to use these machines, factories had to be constructed, and so began the Industrial Revolution. With the Agricultural Revolution, better farming equipment was invented as an effect. With the new and more effective machines being invented because of the Industrial Revolution, an increase of crop production occurred. Now, in Europe there was an abundance of food, which factored into the population boom previously discussed. More people meant more labor. The increases of labor was a large reason for the Industrial Revolution.
In most of Europe, increasing demand for goods was met with increasing production in traditional ways through the addition of new craftsmen to existing workshops. As the population grew and agriculture productivity rose, so did other things. There was a fascination with trade for sugar, tea, cotton, textiles, iron, pottery, and other things. There was also a fascination with innovation, such as scientific discoveries, commercial enterprise, and technical skills, as well as tangible inventions. Britain had a number of characteristics that justify its role in the Industrial Revolution. These characteristics are economic growth, population growth, people willing to use new ideas, mining and metal industries, the largest merchant market at the time, and a strong social structure. Britain also contained strong water transportation, and it had a developed commercial sector. Continental Europe's economy experienced similar dynamic expansion, but lack of markets and management, as well as constant warfare, interrupted trade and weakened the okay, well, this isn't working. And weakened the incentive to get new technology. One change of the Industrial Revolution was the increase in mass production of goods. This shift was caused by breaking the process of making the goods into small, simple, and repetitive tasks. Then, through division of labor among a large workforce, products could be made at a faster rate than they had ever been made before. This allowed goods that used to be only available for high-class citizens to be available to the common folk. Examples of this are cotton clothing and pottery. Industries changed a lot during the Industrial Revolution. Through the mechanization process and new inventions, the cost to make certain goods greatly decreased. The process to make certain luxury goods took much less time and money. The producers that then could afford to sell a larger supply of goods at a lower price point. Middle-class consumers quickly took advantage of this drop and bought previous luxury goods in large quantities. These industries boomed with wealth from the increased supply and increased demand. One key invention to the success of the Industrial Revolution was the steam engine. It is significant because it was the first machine to transform fossil fuels into mechanical energy. It was used in place of humans, animals, wind, and water to create energy. The steam engine also became more and more efficient by inventors such as James Watt. It became so efficient that steam engines were then put on boats and trains to improve transportation. With efficient and fast transportation, goods could move much more quickly, changing society forever. Despite the increased transportation and communication from the steam engine, another invention increased communication speed much more. This invention is the electric telegraph. Messages could be sent and received over a system of wires through codified languages, such as Morse code. Wire systems were first set up across America and used by railroad companies to increase efficiency. Wire systems even crossed oceans, which happened between England and France across the English Channel. Messages could be sent and received faster than ever before, connecting the world together.
By the mid-19th century, smaller towns began to grow even faster. The early Industrial Revolution created wealth amongst many individuals, and this money was often reinvested into the building of fine homes, churches, museums, and theaters in the wealthy areas of London, Berlin, and New York. Urban problems began to rapidly increase with sudden population growth, overcrowding, and inadequate municipal services. As poor immigrants migrated in from the countryside, developers built cheap houses for them to rent, which were often very overcrowded and did not consist of stable living conditions. These countrymen also brought their country ways, and they often threw their sewage and trash out the window to be washed down the gutters into the street. Water and air were both contaminated by man, the water by sewage and trash, and the air by the burning of coal. Cities and towns were also affected by the intrusion of environmentally harmful trains, as well as steamboats that came from India, which brought cholera, and it caused great epidemics. Long before the Industrial Revolution even took place, close to zero wilderness areas were left in Britain, and very few in Western Europe. Almost every piece of land had been affected by humans, and was infested by fields, pastures, or forests shaped by human activity and the uprising of towns. In the Americas, people moved fast to transform their surrounding environment. Governments seized lands from Indians, and it was sold cheaply to white farmers, as well as logging companies. It even came to be that Britain relied heavily on Canada for lumber after Britain had depleted all of the wood from the forests of their homeland. Soon, cotton became popular in the southern U.S., and its cultivation became very harmful. Pioneers completely cleared forests to grow cotton until it depleted all of the soil, then moved west, abandoning the useless land. The theory of the domination of nature by man continued to be passed along by societies, and it put the environment in a seriously endangered position. Although the greatest change in the rural environment was the introduction of new transportation systems. Countries developed quality roads which were extended internationally. However, Britain's lack of quality road production led to the formation of enterprises that built numerous toll roads. Canals were also built to connect larger areas, and later in the time period, train tracks were built across vast areas. Industrialization offered new opportunities for enterprising, and carpenters, metalworkers, and machinists were in high demand. The boldest of the English engineers went into business for themselves and moved to areas such as the Americas, the European continent, and to India to start new industries. However, most factory jobs were boring, repetitive, and required a low skill set. Factory jobs operated around the clock, and gas lights were invented and installed in many places, so work hours were easily able to be extended past sunset. Workdays were long, consisted of few breaks, and foremen constantly monitored the work of the laborers. These factory workers also had no control over their tools, jobs, or working hours. Before the factories, women often did chores at home and only helped in the farming fields during harvesting season. However, women were quickly instilled into the textile mill factories, where they worked jobs that required less physical strength than the jobs of men. Women were also paid anywhere between a third or half of the amount men were. Women avoided factory jobs, and jobs as domestic servants were commonly pursued, despite low pay, drudgery, and the risk of being abused by male employers. Children often accompanied their parents to work by about the age of 5 or 6, and they often did not have a choice whether or not to work because there were no public schools or daycare centers for them to spend their time in. Employers encouraged child labor and often hired orphans because they were cheaper and more docile. In Britain, the least successful individuals were those who possessed an obsolete skill. Weavers experienced a brief prosperity during the cotton boom of the 1790s, but the inefficient and overpaid workers were soon replaced by power looms. The wages of weavers steadily declined, but the industrial regions of Britain and continental Europe, wages for factory workers did not. They rose and fell unsteadily. During the war years of 1792 to 1815, the price of food rose faster than the rate the factory workers were getting paid. Later in the 1820s, industrial production grew over 3% and prices fell and wages rose. The reason the improvement was not steady was due to the effects of the business cycle, a term defined as recurrent swings from economic hard times to recovery and growth, then back to hard times. It wasn't until the 1850s when cheaper food, clothing, and utensils began to improve workers' standard of living, and the true benefiter of the Industrial Revolution became clear: the middle class. In the late 18th century, a new group arose, entrepreneurs who gained wealth from smaller, self-financed manufacturing businesses. And a generation later, rich industrialists began to buy their way into the high society.